She still has the first message saved. She doesn't know why she kept it. She says she should have deleted everything. But she didn't. And sometimes, late at night, when the apartment is quiet and the only light is the glow from her phone, she reads it again, not because it comforts her, but because she needs to remember exactly how it started, how ordinary it looked, how impossible it was to know. The message said, "I think we were matched by mistake, but I'm glad we were." She read it 3 times. Then she smiled. Her name is Patricia. She's 61 years old. She lives in a 2-bedroom apartment in Columbus, Ohio. The same apartment she moved into 11 years ago, right after the divorce. She kept the smaller bedroom for herself and used the other one as a sewing room. She works part-time at a dental office, answering phones, scheduling appointments. She drives a 2014 Honda Civic with a crack in the passenger side mirror she keeps meaning to fix. Her mornings follow a pattern. Coffee at 6:15. The news on in the background. She doesn't really watch it. Just likes the sound of voices. Toast or a banana. Vitamins. A quick check of her phone before she leaves. Then the commute. Then the office. Then home. Then quiet. Her daughter lives in Portland. They talk on Sundays. Sometimes Wednesdays if one of them remembers. Her son is in the army, stationed somewhere she doesn't mention, because she's learned that people ask follow-up questions she can't always answer. She has friends from church, 2 women she has lunch with once a month, a neighbor she waves to, a cat named Douglas. Her life is not unhappy. That's important to understand. She would tell you that herself. She would say, "I was fine. I wasn't desperate. I wasn't falling apart. I was just quiet. And maybe a little lonely in the way that you stop noticing after a while. The way loneliness becomes the temperature of a room and you forget it ever felt different." She had a savings account with $43,000 in it. Money she'd built slowly, over years, from careful choices and small sacrifices. A new roof she'd budgeted for. A trip to see her daughter she'd been planning. Retirement, someday, on her own terms. She called it her safety net, her quiet proof that she'd done something right. It started on a Thursday evening in March. She'd downloaded the app 2 weeks earlier, mostly because her coworker Denise had shown her a photo of the man she'd been talking to and laughed about it and said, "You should try it, Pat. It's free." Patricia had made a profile in about 8 minutes. A photo she liked from her daughter's wedding 2 years ago. Her age. A short description she'd rewritten 4 times before giving up and writing, looking for conversation. No drama. She'd gotten a few messages. She hadn't answered most of them. Then came the one that said he thought they'd been matched by mistake. But he was glad they had. His name was Daniel Reeves. His profile said he was 58, retired civil engineer, originally from Vancouver, now living in Houston but traveling frequently for work. His photo showed a man with silver hair, a dark blue jacket, and the kind of easy, close-mouthed smile that reads as private rather than cold. He looked like someone who'd been interesting once and hadn't stopped. She wrote back. They talked for 3 weeks before she gave him her phone number. That felt careful to her. That felt like she was doing it right. He was good at questions. Not the surface kind. Not what do you do for work and do you have kids. He asked what she'd wanted to be when she was young. He asked what she found hard about living alone. He asked if she'd ever done something impulsive and if it had worked out. She told him she'd once driven to Asheville on a Friday with no plan and came back Sunday having hiked 4 miles and eaten the best peach cobbler of her life. He laughed, a real laugh, not a written one. She could tell the difference. He told her about a bridge he'd worked on in his 30s. A suspension bridge in Southeast Asia. Over a river he described so clearly she felt like she could almost see the color of the water. He said it was the project he was most proud of. He said he'd stood on it on the day it opened and felt like he understood what his life was for. She read that 3 times too. He called her most mornings before she left for work. Not every morning, but enough that when her phone rang at 6:45 she already knew who it was. By April she had stopped looking at other profiles. She hadn't made a conscious decision about it. She just stopped. He asked her once if she was still on the app and she said she didn't really use it anymore, and he said, quietly, that he wasn't either. They didn't put a name on it. They didn't need to yet. He had a way of remembering things she mentioned in passing. She'd said once, weeks earlier, that Douglas, her cat, had a vet appointment coming up, and then on the morning of the appointment, before she'd mentioned it again, he texted, "How did Douglas do?" She stood in the parking lot of the vet's office and stared at her phone for a long moment. Nobody had done that in a very long time. Nobody had kept that small a thing in their memory and thought to ask. She told Denise about him. Denise said he sounded almost too good. Patricia laughed and said yes. Well, that's what she thought too. At first, but she said it in the past tense. At first, as if that period of caution was already behind her. The mornings without calls felt different now. Not bad, exactly, but noticeably quiet in a way the apartment hadn't felt before he started calling. She noticed that her mood on any given day was partly determined by whether they'd spoken. That she found herself reaching for her phone more often. That she was eating better, sleeping better, feeling more like a person who was in the middle of something good. She started telling him things she hadn't told anyone in years. About the divorce, not the legal parts but the slow erosion of it. The way she'd felt like a version of herself she didn't recognize by the end. About her son and the distance between them that wasn't geographic. About a miscarriage she'd had in 1997 that she almost never talked about anymore, because the people who would have understood it had drifted away over time. He listened. He never hurried her past the hard parts. He didn't offer solutions. He just said, "I hear you," and it landed differently than she expected. Simple and real. She told him once, "I think about you more than I should." He said, "I think about you exactly the right amount." In May they started talking about meeting. Not in a concrete way at first. Just the kind of speculation that feels safe, because it's still hypothetical. He mentioned Houston. She mentioned that she'd never been to Texas. He said, "I want to see you in real life. I want to have coffee with you at a table and not through a screen." She told him that was what she wanted too. They talked about it often enough that it started to feel like a plan. Even though no date was ever set, he was in the middle of a long project. An infrastructure consulting job in Malaysia, he said. He'd be back in the States by July at the latest. Maybe late June if things moved quickly. She started thinking about what she would wear. She mentioned it to her daughter on a Sunday call, trying to sound casual. Her daughter said, "That's nice, Mom. Just be careful." Patricia said of course, then changed the subject. She knew, even then, that there had been a moment. A small one, easy to miss. In early April, during one of their long evening calls, she'd heard a sound in the background, a voice, brief and indistinct, speaking what might have been a different language. She'd asked about it. He'd said it was the television. She'd accepted that immediately. She hadn't held the question in her hand long enough to turn it over. And now, looking back, she knows exactly when it started. The first request came in late May. He'd been in Malaysia for several weeks by then, working on what he described as a government infrastructure project, assessment and planning for a new port facility. He talked about it often enough that she had a general picture of it. He seemed proud of the work. He sounded tired sometimes. The way people sound when they're somewhere far from home and the hours don't quite line up with anything familiar. He called one evening and his voice was different. Not distressed, exactly. More careful. He said there had been a complication with his payment. His company used an international bank transfer system. And a flag had come up, a compliance review. Something regulatory and bureaucratic and dull that he explained in enough detail that it felt real. The short version was, His access to his own accounts was frozen pending the review. It would be cleared in 10 to 12 days, but he had a supplier invoice due in 3. He said, "I wouldn't ask if I had any other option." He asked if she could wire him $1,400 to cover the invoice. He would pay her back as soon as the freeze lifted, and he'd add something for the trouble. He sent her a PDF of what appeared to be the invoice. He sent a screenshot of the bank notification about the compliance hold. She sat with it for a day. She felt the discomfort of it, the slight wrongness in the air, the way it didn't quite fit the shape of the thing she thought she was in. But she also ran through what she knew about him. 4 months of calls, the bridge over the Asian River, Douglas's vet appointment, the miscarriage she'd mentioned, and the way he'd held it quietly in the conversation without making it bigger than it needed to be. She thought, "This is not a stranger. I know this person." She sent $1,400. He called her that evening and his voice was warm and grateful and exactly like itself. The compliance review, he said, was taking longer than expected. Not unusual, he explained. Regulatory processes in international banking could stretch unpredictably. He apologized. He was clearly frustrated. She believed the frustration. 3 weeks passed. He paid her back $600 of the $1,400. He said the rest would come as soon as the hold fully cleared. The partial repayment mattered to her more than it should have. It felt like proof. Then in mid-June he called and said there was another issue. His project had hit a materials delay and the supplier was threatening to pull out. He needed to show good faith. A partial payment of $3,800 to hold them in place. The main funds would release within the week. He said, "Patricia, I promise you, the moment I'm back in the States, I'm going to look you in the eye and settle every dollar of this. But right now I'm asking you to trust me one more time." She hesitated. "That's important." She did hesitate. She sat with the phone in her hand and she felt something she couldn't quite name. A thin, cold pressure in the center of her chest. Not a warning she heard. More like whether she sensed without understanding what kind it was. She told him she needed a day to think. He said, "Of course, take all the time you need." She spent that day going over everything in her head. The calls, the questions he asked, the things she'd told him. She looked up his name online and found nothing, which she told herself was what you'd expect for a private person. A technical professional, someone who hadn't built a public presence. She called Denise, who said, "Pat, I don't know. That's a lot of money. Have you video called him?" Patricia said yes, they had. Twice. She didn't mention that both times had been brief and slightly choppy. That the connection had been unreliable. That she'd mostly seen his face in still photographs. She filed that away without naming it. The next morning she sent $3,800. She told herself a story that month. She was aware she was telling it. That awareness didn't stop her. The story went like this. "I'm a careful person. I am not someone who gets swept up in things. I have been careful with money my entire adult life. The fact that I am choosing to help someone I care about does not make me foolish. It makes me someone who has decided, consciously and with full information, to extend trust to a person who has earned it over months of genuine connection. This is a choice, not a mistake." The story had gaps. She knew where the gaps were. She filled them with the sound of his voice on the phone. With the way he said her name, not Pat, not Patty, but Patricia. With all 3 syllables, as if it meant something. She did not tell her daughter. She told herself this was because she didn't want to hear, "Mom, be careful." But really, underneath that, she knew what she was protecting. She was protecting the feeling that she was in something real. That someone, somewhere, held her specific shape in his mind. She hadn't felt that in a long time. She didn't want to look at it too directly in case it disappeared. Here is a question that won't be answered for a while yet. If everything Daniel said about himself was a lie, the name, the job, the city, the silver hair and the blue jacket, then who, exactly, had she spent those 4 months with? Because the connection had been real. She wasn't imagining the conversations. She wasn't misremembering the care in his questions. Something real had passed between two people across that distance. She's certain of it. And that certainty, she'll tell you, is the part that still costs her most to think about. Because if the person wasn't real, what was? July. He said the project had been put on hold by the Malaysian government pending a review. His own fees, nearly 90,000 due to him, were frozen in escrow until the review cleared. He was stranded. His return flight had been delayed. His company's local office was unresponsive. He needed 7,200 to cover living expenses and a legal fee required to advance the escrow release. She asked him to send her documentation. He sent her a letter on official-looking government letterhead, a bank statement showing the escrow amount, a photo of what appeared to be his work permit. She withdrew 7,200 from her savings account. The teller, a young woman she knew by name, said, "Big purchase," Patricia said, helping a friend. She stood in the parking lot afterward and called him, and he answered on the second ring. She told him she'd sent it. He was quiet for a moment and then said, "You have no idea what this means to me." Her savings account was down to 30,600. She told herself, "One more week. The escrow will clear. He'll be back in the States. I'll see his face at a table over coffee, and this whole thing will be behind us, and we'll laugh about it, and it will become the story of how we met. The obstacle that made the beginning harder and the rest more solid." She wanted that story. She needed it. She had paid for it in installments, and she was not willing to accept that it wasn't true. Late July. His voice on the phone was different again. Tight. He said the escrow release had been blocked by a new legal complication. A government auditor had flagged the project, and now a formal clearance document was required from an international compliance authority. The fee for the document was 12,000. Without it, the 90,000 would not release. His lawyers were recommending he pay it immediately. He said, "I know how this sounds. I know what I'm asking. I'm asking you anyway, because you're the only person I trust and because I swear to you on everything I have left. This is the last one. When that escrow clears, I am going to pay you back every dollar, every cent with interest. And then I am getting on a plane and I am coming to you." She sat very still. She said she didn't have 12,000 liquid. He said she could send what she could. She said she could send 9,500. He said, "Patricia, thank you. I'll never forget this." She sat at her kitchen table that evening and opened her banking app and looked at the balance for a long time. The number was 21,100. 11 years of careful choices. She thought about the new roof, the trip to Portland, retirement on her own terms. She thought about Daniel's voice and the bridge over the river and the way she'd felt. For 7 months. Like she was the specific shape of someone's thoughts. She sent 9,500. August. The escrow did not clear. His calls became shorter. The connection was worse. Twice she called and it went straight to voicemail. He texted explanations. Said the process was delayed again. Said the auditor had requested additional paperwork. Said, 2 more weeks, I promise. She stopped sleeping well. She stopped eating the way she had been. She went back through every message, every email, every document he'd sent her. She started Googling. Not his name, she'd done that already. She Googled phrases. International escrow compliance fee, bank freeze overseas worker, romance scam Malaysia engineer. The results came back fast. They always do. She called him. He answered. She said, very quietly, "Are you really who you say you are?" There was a pause. Then his voice, still warm, still steady, still careful, said, "Patricia, after everything we've shared, I can't believe you'd ask me that." He said it with just enough hurt in it, just enough disbelief. Not defensive, wounded. And she felt, even then, even in that moment, the pull of not wanting to have caused him pain. The reflex of apology. The old groove. She said, "I'm sorry. I just. I needed to hear you say it. He said, I'm real. What we have is real. Hold on just a little longer. She held on. 3 days later his number went dead. She called it 5 times in a row. Then 6. Then she put the phone down on the kitchen table and sat with her hands pressed flat against the wood. Fingers spread wide. She looked at her hands for a long time. The way the knuckles went pale from pressure. She breathed in slowly. Breathed out. Her hands did not move. She picked up the phone again. She opened her banking app. She looked at the transfers one by one. Each one with its date, its amount, its memo line. She scrolled through them the way you might review a document you can no longer change. 1,400, 3,800, 7,200, 9,500, total, 21,900. She put the phone face down on the table. She sat in the kitchen for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. Douglas came and pressed his head against her ankle and she didn't move. Outside it was raining. A soft August rain. The kind that doesn't come to anything. She watched it through the window. Her chest rose and fell. She did not cry. Not yet. The money was gone. Not all of it. Her account still had 21,100 in it. She had not been left with nothing. But what she had now was not the same thing as what she'd had before. Before, there had been 43,000 and a plan. A shape of the future she could see clearly. Now there was 21,100 and the knowledge of how it had happened. And those two things don't weigh the same. The roof would still need to be replaced eventually. She'd been putting it off for 2 years already. The estimate was 14,000. She'd hoped to do it this fall. She wouldn't now. The trip to Portland to see her daughter, to meet her grandson who had been born in June and who she had not yet held in her arms. She pushed it out by 8 months. Maybe more. She called her daughter on a Sunday and said she'd had some unexpected expenses. Her daughter said, "Mom, what kind of expenses?" Aunt Patricia said the furnace had needed servicing and left it there. She couldn't explain the rest yet. The words for it weren't ready. But the money was only part of it. Money is countable. You can write the number down. What she also lost was the feeling. The 6:45 phone call. The sensation of being someone whose name was said with all 3 syllables. The months of believing she was in the middle of something real. Something that was going somewhere. That had a shape and a direction and a face she was going to see across a table. That had been taken from her just as deliberately as the cash. More deliberately, maybe, because it was the tool used to take the cash. It was the whole mechanism. And it had worked because she had let it. Because she had wanted it to. That's the part she struggles with. Not the shame. Though the shame is there. And it is large. And she carries it quietly. The part she struggles with is the fact that she can't unremember feeling good. She can't make those months feel like nothing. He wasn't real, but she was. Her loneliness was real. Her hunger for connection was real. The warmth she felt when he called was real. Those things happened inside her. They belonged to her. And she doesn't know what to do with them now, that the person who seemed to have caused them has turned out to be a fiction. She filed a report with the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. The detective she spoke to was kind. He told her this type of fraud is among the most common in the country. He told her the perpetrators are almost always overseas, operating in organized networks, running dozens of scripts simultaneously. He told her she would very likely not recover the money. He told her she should not feel foolish. She thanked him. She felt foolish anyway. She has spent a lot of time, in the months since, going back through the markers, the places where she could have stopped, the moments where something felt off and she chose, consciously or not, to step around it. The voice in the background that might have been a different language. The video calls that were always brief and always choppy. The name that returned nothing when she searched it. The first request that came attached to a document that looked just official enough without quite being right. Denise saying, "That's a lot of money." Her daughter saying, "Just be careful." Her own hand pressing flat against the kitchen table. Her own chest carrying something she couldn't name for months before the number went dead. She saw all of it. She saw it clearly enough to feel it. And she stepped around it anyway, because the alternative meant letting go of something she had already decided to keep. She had made an investment, not just financial, but emotional, and identity-based and hopeful. And each time she chose to ignore a signal, she was protecting that investment. Sunk cost isn't just a financial concept. It operates in the body, in the part of you that has already decided who you are in this story and doesn't want to revise it. She says now, "I knew. I think on some level I always knew. I just didn't want it to be true." That sentence is the hardest one in this story. Not because it's unique to her, but because it isn't. We tell this story not because Patricia was careless. She wasn't. We tell it because she was careful, in many of the ways that people are taught to be careful. And it still happened. Because this kind of fraud is not designed to fool careless people. It is designed to find the specific gap between what someone has and what they want. It is designed to enter through loneliness or routine, or the ordinary human need to feel like someone is paying attention. It finds its way in because it starts as something real. The feeling is real. The need is real. Only the person is invented. The warning signs Patricia saw were real too. She saw them. She just saw them through the lens of everything she wanted to be true. And that lens changed their shape. If you think this could never happen to you, this is exactly how it begins. Not with a stranger asking for money. With a message that reads like an accident. With a voice that calls at the same time each morning. With someone who remembers the small things. With 4 months of something that feels like a beginning. The things you can do slow down when any online relationship, no matter how long or how warm, moves toward a financial request. Never send money to someone you have not met in person, verified independently, and spoken with through multiple channels over time. A video call is not verification. A document is not verification. A warm and consistent voice is not verification. The only verification is in person, over time, cross-checked through channels the other person did not provide. Tell someone. The instinct to protect a new relationship from outside scrutiny is normal. It is also the mechanism this fraud relies on. Tell a friend, a sibling, a coworker. Say the number out loud. Let someone else hear it before you send it. And know this, if you are lonely or recently changed, or quieter than you used to be, that is not a weakness. It is not a flaw that makes you a target. It is the condition of being human at a particular moment in your life. The people who run these schemes look for it the same way any predator looks for an opening. Understanding that doesn't make you safe, but it makes you harder to surprise. Patricia's apartment is the same as it was before. Coffee at 6:15. The news on in the background. Douglas on the armrest of the couch. The crack in the passenger side mirror she keeps meaning to fix. She doesn't use the app anymore. She didn't delete it for a long time, and she can't fully explain why. Maybe because deleting it would have been a kind of admission. Or maybe because she wasn't ready, for a while, to close completely the door it had opened. The door towards something. The feeling that she might still be in the middle of something. That there was still a direction. She deleted it in November. She talks to her daughter more now. They speak most Wednesdays. She is planning the trip to Portland for the spring. She has a rough budget, a rough time,